Mundell, this isn't the end of it, really. Would you say the independence referendum, it didn't end in 2014?
No, well, it hasn't, and without troubling Elaine, I mean, Alec has, lets the cat out of the bag again. It doesn't matter what the people of Scotland want in relation to having another referendum. It's the SNP that will decide whether we have another referendum or not. I think people in Scotland are just scunnered of the ongoing constitutional debate and actually want to get on with, firstly, the Scottish Government doing the day job, the UK Government, Scottish Government working together in Brexit, which we'll come on to. That's what they want. They don't want this constant constitutional debate.
Okay, let me bring in Elaine Smith.
Well, I'm lucky, and I'm not a politician and not a member of any political party, even though I supported Yes and very active in the movement there. I think the discussion is about the type of country we want to live in, and given what has happened with Brexit in particular, that has brought it all back to. I was one of the people. I never thought we'd win. Actually, I wanted to run them close. I never thought at any point the country actually at that point was ready, but I still campaigned and fought for what I believed in, and that was what the discussion was about. It was about saying, how do we want to live, and what kind of a nation do we want to be?
And yet, Elaine, after 3 years of debate on a referendum, and you're right, it exposed all these splits and the difference in deprivation. None of that has been addressed, and it's not going to be addressed with another independence referendum.
Let's move on ever so slightly, just because time is moving on from us. But your side won, Tom. But
theoretically,
but over the long term, the Labour Party certainly has lost drastically. Why has that happened?
Oh, that's a very good question. I was asked this on election night, as you saw in that clip, and I drew a blank that night because it felt like I was in the middle of a car crash.
You've had time to reflect, though.
The referendum changed everything. You know, in 2010, I was elected in Glasgow South with a 12,500 majority. 5 years later, my replacement, Stuart MacDonald, who's a very good MP, incidentally, was elected with a similar size majority. Something massive happened. It wasn't just that people, the Labour Party got complacent. It wasn't that we started taking things for granted. It was the referendum. If the referendum had happened, I think, earlier in the Parliament timetable, I think the yes vote would have been subdued, and I think there would have been a chance for us to recover. But there's no doubt the referendum has changed everything, and it's thanks to him in that Aberdeen studio, Alex Salmond, and all credit to him. It's his strategy that has transformed the political map of Scotland.
Do you take that credit, Alex Salmond?
Oh, absolutely. one of the most astute things that Tom Harris has said. But actually, if I could just let modesty overtake me for a second, Tom. The reason for the Labour Party's demise is not actually sitting in the Aberdeen studio, it's sitting in the London studio. And the reason for that is there is David Mundell, the single Tory MP, Secretary of State for Scotland. He is the only Tory MP, and therefore he's Secretary of State for Scotland, at 21% of the vote, dispensing his wisdom as to what the people think or don't think. Because the one thing that David will never accept is the result of elections in Scotland. That's what tells you what people think. And the reason that the Labour Party went into oblivion in Scotland is that you chose to campaign for that principle. That people like David Mundell, you campaign with them side by side, shoulder to shoulder, and that's what the price that Labour have been paying since the referendum. Not because actually even so much of what you campaigned for, but how you campaigned, and the company you kept during that campaign.
But David Mundell, it would appear that the Scottish Conservatives, certainly in Holyrood, have benefited from it.
I think the Scottish Conservatives under Ruth Davidson's leadership, Ruth's one person who stayed in a leadership job throughout, almost throughout the period of Scotland today, I think have been re-energised. I think they've been able to set a clear vision of what they want to achieve.
Is this because
the United Kingdom want?
Is this because the Conservatives? Is it because of the Conservatives' message, or is it because Labour has collapsed?
I think it's because we have a very clear message, which is we want to keep Scotland in the United Kingdom. We don't want another independence referendum. And Ruth is able to hold the Scottish Government to account in the Scottish Parliament. Even people who support the SNP don't want to live in a one-party state in Scotland. They want their government held to account. And I think that's obviously the role of the Scottish Parliament.
I think it's very interesting. It's a combination of things, that Ruth has stayed in the job and all of that. it always seems to be incredibly ironic that the Tories in Scotland survived because, and they're in a parliament that they campaigned against, that they didn't even want in the first place, and now they're crowing almost about how their vote has increased by 1% or whatever.
But that's, Elaine, because the one thing about us is that we are willing and able to actually, contrary to what Alex says, respect election results. The people of Scotland chose to have the Scottish Parliament, and we have given it our full and comprehensive support.
Okay, let's move on. Okay. Let's move on for the final part of the discussion. Alex Salmon, does Brexit mean there will be a second independence referendum?
Well, it means that Nicola Sturgeon has the mandate, for one, because that's what was in the SNP manifesto in which she was re-elected in May, that if Scotland was dragged out of Europe against the will of the Scottish people, which is what has happened, then the Scottish Parliament should have the right to hold another referendum. But I think what Nicola will do, and it's pretty clear what she'll do, in contrast to the opaqueness of Theresa May's position, she'll put forward a plan to discharge that mandate, to keep in the single market, to protect the right of fellow European citizens, to protect workers' rights in Scotland. And she'll present that within the next few weeks to the UK government to see if they're prepared to listen to the voice of Scotland. And it's on the reception that plan gets will be decided whether there's an independence referendum in around 2 years' time.
Tom?
I would encourage Alec to read his own manifesto. There is no promise to hold a second referendum in the event of a material change of Scotland being taken out of the EU against its will. There is a complaint in the manifesto. There's a complaint that it should have the power, but it's very explicitly in the manifesto that it doesn't have the power. Now, when Alec wrote a foreword to the 2013 White Paper, Scotland's Future, he said it was a once-in-a-generation opportunity, and in the same paper, you can check it, Alec, is at the top of page 217, there is actually a warning by the SNP that if you vote no and Scotland stays in the UK, we may be taken out of the EU against its will. Now, there was no reference in that white paper to any second referendum, any change in circumstances.
Okay.
Alec didn't tell us that at the time, and I wonder why.
Alec, come in on that briefly.
Well, page 23 of the manifesto in which Nicola was re-elected, if there's a material change in circumstance, the Scottish Parliament should have the right to hold another... Yes, should have an independence referendum. It can't complain if Nicola Sturgeon exercises that right, if Westminster refuses to accept
the manifesto doesn't have
enunciated demand from the Scottish people.
Let me bring in David Mundell on this point. Could Theresa May be more receptive to the points being put to her by the Scottish Government to prevent a second independence referendum?
I want to see what Nicola Sturgeon's proposing. I've said right from the 24th of June, the Prime Minister's reiterated to Nicola Sturgeon today that whatever proposals she brings forward, of course, we'll look at them. We want to secure the best possible deal for Scotland and the UK as we leave the EU. But we voted as part of the United Kingdom, having voted to stay in the United Kingdom, with a result that across the United Kingdom, that the United Kingdom as a whole left the EU. Now, that's what's going to happen, and we need to find a way in which we negotiate the best possible settlement, taking into account Scotland's specific needs and concerns, that gives us that deal as we go into these negotiations. But of course we'll listen to any options, but no specific options have been put on the table.
Elaine, as a yes campaigner, are you enthusiastic that there may be a second one?
Yes, I am, but forgive me if I'm mistrustful of the politicians in Westminster who are in power, given what has just happened over the last few months. I have to say, David, but I think for the wider yes movement, it is about looking at another referendum because those circumstances have changed in Scotland. But personally, for me, I don't want us to do it till I know we'll win it. And I haven't read the SNP manifesto. I have no idea what's in there or not. I'm not going to argue about that. I'm sure, bedtime reading. But it seems to me that there is, because the circumstances have changed so much, I think there is, even people I know, friends of mine who were avid no campaigners, are thinking very, very differently about Scotland's place within the UK and within Europe.
Very briefly and finally, Elaine, I'll go round all of you and keep your answers brief on this. Is Scotland a better place now than it was 5 years ago?
I would say absolutely. It is a better place, not without problems, not in a was like us sort of way. We're perfect. We have a lot of problems here and a lot of work to do here, but it's a better place than it was.
David Mundell.
Some things are better, some things are worse. I would like to see the end of this division that this endless constitutional squabbling brings about.
Alex Salmond.
Substantial social progress, equal marriage, for example, still many challenges in terms of poverty and deprivation, but it's a politically energised country, and that must be a good thing.
And is that a better place, finally, Tom Harris?
I think it is. I mean, the equal marriage we all welcome. That was legislated in Scotland by the UK Parliament. There's no doubt. I don't want to be curmudgeonly about it. I actually think the increased political activism that Alec was talking about is to be welcomed. I think the huge amount of new members in SNP didn't do my party any good, but it's never a bad thing in democracy when that number of people are involved directly in active politics.
It's been a fascinating discussion. I'm afraid that's where we'll have to leave it. But thank you all for joining us in Scotland.
Pleasure.
Special programme. Thank you.